Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Dorn. It is Big 12 Thursday. More importantly, it is Mock Selection Committee Thursday. We will be joined by Rocco Miller, Dave Oman, Anthony Valentino, our newest member of the mock, Matt Browning. We're doing that in a couple of hours. So after you watch this and you get sick of hearing about garbage bubble teams like TCU and Oklahoma State, come on back. We'll be talking to all the top 16 teams. The number 4 overall seed alone is probably going to be worth the price of admission, which is $0. But get some Guinness, come drink with me. Graham, how are you feeling about the Big 12 bubble? I know some days it feels like we might get an eighth team in. Now it's no longer looking so good.
Yeah, I'm feeling like TCU didn't really have a bad loss, but I felt like just losing a single game at that point in the bubble, it took them from being kind of strongly on my 11 line all the way to falling out. And uh, I don't know what to think about the Horned Frogs. Some days I love them because of the good wins. Other days I look at that loss to New Orleans and it just looks a little bit worse than the day before.
All right, well, let's look at that loss because it is hideous. That's the spreadsheet, right? Yeah, there we go. Um, we've got BYU here. We're not going to touch on Arizona, Kansas, Texas Tech. Who are the other ones? Iowa State, Houston. They'll all be discussed in the top 16, so we're just going to skip over them from now. They're all up there. Texas Tech is the only one that's even questionable to make that cut. But BYU, I have as my top 7 seed after yet another loss to a quad 1A team. Temporarily moved them up. I think I had them at 26 overall heading into the week, and then 21 through 25 all lost. So I was like, oh, damn. BYU 22, sure. Now I had to drop them again. You still have them at 22. All the metrics kind of say 22, 23, but at what point are they actually going to get a win worth mentioning?
It might not happen, especially after the Richie Saunders injury. I mean, we already saw what happened without him, or with him. Now without him is questionable. I will say that I keep wanting to drop BYU. I really intend to drop them, and then I keep looking at the teams I'm competing with. I'm like, all right, should I move Wisconsin ahead of them? Should I move Clemson ahead of them? Should I move Miami ahead of them? Should I move Villanova ahead of them? Something keeps happening every time I look for a team to move ahead of BYU. They're running into a major issue, which is they beat all these teams out of conference. And
Yeah.
maybe BYU not performing so well says more about the top of the Big 12 instead of BYU.
Yeah, they have a lot of pretty good wins, right? Villanova, I think I have at like 23 overall. Wisconsin, I've got in the 20s. Clemson's around 30. Miami, somewhere in that range as well. So neutral wins over like let's call them all 7 seeds for now. That's pretty good. It's not Graham Dorn elite, but it's pretty good, and 4 of them is very impressive. So yeah, it's hard to drop BYU, especially with we're looking at teams like UCF there in the high 30s who you know they've got some question marks as well. I mean, I think BYU's a lock, but I think they can still continue to slip. I mean, if they were to lose to Texas Tech at home. Now that the Red Raiders don't have JT Toppin, I think that gets a little more questionable, especially if Texas Tech picks up, some other bad loss along the way and no longer looks like a top 20 type of team. But BYU's in. They're just not going to come up in our top 16 conversation tonight. UCF right there in that 8-9 seed range. Still looking pretty good. Home wins over Kansas and Texas Tech at Texas A&M. Home win over TCU is not a great fourth best win, but it's at least relevant as far as the bubble is concerned. What do you think UCF would need to do to fall out the rest of the way? Because I think even if they go 0-5, they'd still be like right around a 0 wob.
Yeah, just looking at the home games against Baylor and Oklahoma State, they win those two. That might actually be enough. Like it's
I think
crazy
so.
to think about, but that really could be it. Probably if they win 3 of the 5, they're pretty safe.
Yeah, I think even one, they're probably pretty safe. I mean, I guess if you lose West Virginia and Utah, that becomes problematic, but I think they're in pretty good shape. Question in the chat, Bram Janvrin 5966. What team drops more between Texas Tech or BYU with the injury news? That's a good question. I mean, I think we were already looking, as we've just discussed, for a reason to drop BYU. So if they don't look good down the stretch and they already don't have great wins, I was looking earlier, the Ken Palm top five has a combined total of 13 losses, and three of those are to Texas Tech. So I think they have way more of a cushion. I don't see Texas Tech like plummeting. I could see Texas Tech dropping to like maybe a 7 seed. But if BYU really crashes and burns, like they could fall into like that 10, 11 range. I can't see them falling out, but I could see them falling into a double digit seed. What do you think?
Yeah, and even for me, it's tough to see Texas Tech down at a 7. Like maybe if they're really bad down the stretch, but they've just done so much, and frankly, they still have a good squad without Toppin. So we'll see how they perform. But I think Texas Tech, like you mentioned, maybe 7 is the worst case scenario. I would think probably, if things go poorly, they're talking about a 6 seed, but more likely, I think Texas Tech will probably end at a 5 seed, if I had to guess. BYU they're running into two things. One, we talked already about the lack of elite wins that they have, but two, there's just such a mess once you get out of those top 5 seeds. I mean, anywhere from like 21 overall, and I've been talking about the big drop off at the back end of the 6 line, but even the front end of the 6 line now, UNC doesn't have Kalen Wilson, BYU doesn't have Richie Saunders. Like, there's just so much potential volatility there. I could easily see anybody, including BYU, moving from like a 6 seed to a 9 seed or a 9 seed up to a 6 seed. The potential to fly up or down the seed list in that area is really unlike anything I've seen before in past years. There's not a lot separating a UCF. Like you look at UCF, I could see UCF flying up the seed list. They have a pretty solid resume overall. All it's going to take is a road win at BYU, and maybe BYU and UCF are switching places. So just really, really big seed potential, not just for BYU, but really all of the teams in that area.
Yeah, I do think speaking on WOB real quick for BYU, they are 4.19 wins above bubble, and I feel like these are probably all roughly like zero point 0.5 type games. I mean, worst case scenario, they would drop to like 1.8 wins above bubble, somewhere in that range if they were to lose all five. So yeah, I think it could get dicey for them, but I don't think either one could possibly fall out. TCU, Oklahoma State, teams right on the bubble, although Oklahoma State, it doesn't feel like they are like zero point 0.7 wob behind TCU. It feels like they are way behind the Horned Frogs, although, as you mentioned earlier, TCU has all of those hideous losses. I mean, even their fourth worst loss is, I mean, worse than the worst loss that maybe any of these teams is. It's pretty darn bad. Home against Notre Dame, home against New Orleans is obviously the big one, but they just have such a stockpile of bad losses that it's gotten tough to know what to do with them. Usually we have like six of these teams on the bubble who have, two or three really good wins, three or four really questionable losses, and it's just like we find some way to sort them. But I you have TCU just barely out. I have them just barely in. It's really a question of, are you okay with the bad losses when the team that you're putting in ahead of them are like Ohio State or Santa Clara, who just don't have any quad one wins. It's that classic bubble situation. But I do think there's a pretty clear line in the sand. Like we're not even really considering Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Arizona State. Like they're going to need to play their way in down the stretch, and even Arizona State, as we looked at, surprisingly could. It'd be hideous, but they're 14-12. If they were to win out, they're not even a full win below bubble at the moment. They would get a home win over Kansas or road win over Iowa State. Like they could get interesting in a hurry, but they do need to win out. I think even 4-1 wouldn't do it for them. Anything on any of this non BYU UCF bubble scenario that you want to touch on?
Think West Virginia and Baylor are alive. Cincinnati's an interesting one because I don't really see any potential path for them to make the tournament, but I do think they could be pretty critical to some other teams coming up here. If Cincinnati continues to play well, that might really thwart the tournament chances of some other Big 12 teams. So, how the Bearcats do, maybe they could turn into that Oklahoma role that they tend to serve for the
Mm.
SEC, where you just and Ohio State, you mentioned them, tend to do that for the Big Ten. Maybe Cincinnati could do a few favors for some Big 12 tournament teams.
All right, two more questions from the chat before we wrap up. Again, we're keeping it super short today because we'll be talking plenty later. New Testament Christian says mock committee just left Kansas off the 2 line. Do you agree that is nuts? I don't think it's nuts. I do have Kansas at 8. Uh, we have already put together our consensus seed list for tonight, and it was kind of a 50-50 split between Purdue and Kansas for that last 2 seed, top 3 seed. I think it'll be an interesting conversation that we'll get into, but I definitely don't think it's nuts. Graham, I think you even have Kansas at 10 overall, correct?
No, I don't have Kansas at 10, but I do have them at 9. And I think
Okay.
the debate we're probably going to see tonight, if I had to guess, is I bet people are split on Purdue and Kansas on who goes to the two seed spot, who goes to the 3 seed spot. And usually when we do this stuff as a mock committee, like we all kind of have an idea of the teams we're most likely to argue about. I think we know Purdue Kansas is going to be an argument. And those are fun because sometimes you come into it thinking you're kind of set one way, and after chatting with the other
Yeah,
committee members, you can get convinced that maybe you didn't actually have it right after all.
that's the beauty of this. We unanimously had Illinois at number 7 overall. I'll be curious to see if they actually land at 7 overall when all's said and done tonight. One more question from Bram Janvrin, TCU or Santa Clara, who is more likely to get in?
I think it's TCU. You just look at those quality wins. I think it's going to help TCU kind of stand out at that bubble area. Even if Santa Clara beats St. Mary's, I don't know that that's really jumping off the page that much. I think Santa Clara probably needs to go on the road to beat St. Mary's and then maybe even follow it up in the West Coast Conference tournament. They might have to take all 3 from the Gales to get in, whereas I feel like TCU might have a little bit more wiggle room. I also think I've mentioned this many times if you've been paying attention over the past year or so, this would be the 4th consecutive year the Big 12 could potentially have the first team out of the tournament field. I have to imagine those committee members kind of have that on their mind that do we really want to leave a Big 12 team out again for the 4th consecutive year if they're close? The other thing I think that's kind of going to TCU's favor, I don't think the SEC is going to get all of those bubble teams in. Right now, I think they're in. 1 or 2 of them is probably going to play their way out. That could open up a space for TCU.
I do think, at least in terms of wins above bubble, you see here TCU is at 0.34. I forget what Santa Clara was, 1.2. So they're almost a full win ahead, but they don't have those great wins. It's just the home win over St. Mary's. To your point, TCU's beaten Florida on a neutral, which looks crazy right now. Wisconsin the following day, which also looks crazy. Home win over Iowa State. Like that is one heck of a 1, 2, 3 punch. So I agree. I think TCU is more likely, even though Santa Clara has the better metrics at the moment. So that'll wrap us up. I got to get my daughter to her dance class. And I hope you guys will join us for the mock later tonight, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to go buy some Guinness and get ready to get a little buzzed while we